T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Launch Sequence Podcast. We're going to talk some Star Citizen today with y'all and some interesting developments going on. Now, we are shooting this on Friday the 6th, before some supposed 800-player stress tests are beginning for server meshing, and before a Star Citizen Live episode with Benoit, who is kind of very involved with the team doing server meshing. So while today's episode is going to be a talk about 4.0 server meshing, what's going on with it, and how it relates to 3.0, the parallels we see, the differences we see, we are operating under information that you will have, or rather, without information you will have by the time you watch this, so bear with us. But today, I have brought in analyst and fellow Star Citizen historian Nazeris, who I've been on a number of podcasts with, but I think this is your first on the launch sequence. Besides that episode 100 special, that was a good one. Yeah. But a traditional episode like this, it's going to be good times. Welcome in, buddy. How you doing?
Thanks so much. It's awesome. Currently, kind of like that weird like morning vibe you get is what I'm feeling right now. It's like you're still kind of waking up, but I'm super excited. I was really hoping to like get all that like information specifically for the show, playing the server meshing test last night, and then like, yeah, there was a bug, we can't push it live.
Yeah. Covering Star Citizen be like that. Like you have a plan for weeks, video planned out, podcast, something. And then at the last minute, something happens with Star Citizen and you can't do it. That's like every month. I'd say that happens at least 2 or 3 times. Never gets old.
Yeah, and like especially with the how kind of cutting edge the testing channel is. It's just like they barely have this thing like able to run on their end, and they're like, hey, we're gonna let this go to some servers and you're gonna kind of connect to it, and they have no idea what's gonna happen.
Yeah. So forewarning for everybody before we get into it, we're just going to start straight off with talking about kind of server meshing tests that we have seen and what we might see from them going into, the weekend as they run them next week, and really going forward towards towards 4.0 and what we expect. But you're going to have to, again, bear with me. A lot of bearing with me today. We're taking care of our niece. Many of you may know, seen us on the cooking stream or just our posts on Twitter. We're taking care of our niece this week. We have a very close relationship with her, and we do a lot of caretaking with her, and it's her first time in school, proper school, kindergarten. And as is tradition, she has brought home a little bug with her. And so I have gotten quite sick, surprisingly, over the last couple of days, and may or may not be a coughing, sniffling mess during this. Now, I will mute my microphone, but just forewarning, if my voice sounds different or if I start dying in the background, don't worry about it. Just keep watching the podcast. It's cool. Like, you guys, you're here for the entertainment. I'm sure that's plenty entertaining. So, that being said, thanks for coming, everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful week yourselves. Let's start talking about server meshing really in Star Citizen. For anybody who doesn't know what the point of server meshing is, I guess, why don't we just like lay that out basically? I know we just did this on Captain Staple just a few weeks ago, but let's do like a really brief summary of why they are doing server meshing and why it's actually important to the game. Why don't you start us off?
Well, you can't hold an entire 100 star systems plus players to actually saturate them, plus run the logic for NPCs on them for, the 10-to-1 ratio they want for NPCs on a single server. That's just not possible. Even simple games like where they're, let's say, Microsoft Flight Sim as an archetype, just a game that's a relative single player, and all you're doing is flying over terrain, which is all static. Even trying to run that probably can't be run on a single server. So even stuff like World of Warcraft and Ultima Online back in the day didn't run the entire game on one server. It was a mesh of servers that all communicated. The difference here with modern server meshing, this kind of like introduction of this new kind of where everyone's calling it server meshing, not just MMO server architecture, is a way to in real time communicate across the border of the server. And so the reason Star Citizen is doing it, and the reason Star Citizen is doing it this way, is to get a high player count and a high player density for the game space, and to be able to scale it with the same density across, like I said, 100 star systems.
Yeah, and so it's not necessarily new. Like there are constant arguments, I think actually more of kind of gotcha statements about Star Citizen's not doing anything new with server meshing. Why are you guys freaking out? And it's more kind of a combination of different things with server meshing, right?
Yeah. Like it's server meshing is not new because, like I said, Ultima Online had a server architecture where multiple servers connected to the world and you could transition between them. Except traditional MMOs had either a buffer between them or an entire load screen where you had to do a transition between a server. Most I don't know exactly the architecture of MapleStory, but it was each frame was only one world, and I could imagine that some of the world was cordoned off between different servers in the mesh, so there was a fade to black every time you switched the map. And I imagine a lot of them were actually transitioning over servers. I don't know, but that's traditionally kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
There's either a fade to black or there's an in between where nothing else is, and you probably have seen some where you walk onto a part of the map and you see somebody walk supposedly down this like corridor or kind of crevice in a mountain, and they just kind of blip out of existence. And then once you follow them, you blip out of existence onto the next server, and then you see them walking again. Because the servers didn't talk to each other. It was just basically a way to just split the world.
Yeah.
It's only quite recently. I don't know the first one to do it. First MMO that is, but to have multiple servers be able to in real time not to blip out the player and just have them continuously walking. That's one of the biggest things that another game that's really come up in the last month or so, couple months, is Ashes of Creation. In their talk, that's one of the things they really talked on was being able to in real time see the other player on the other side of the server border.
Yeah, lots of comparisons between Star Citizen and Ashes of Creation, and generally kind of the same criticisms. As I know that's a game that, sorry guys, a cough drop. That's a game that's been taking a little while. When I think it's been about 7-8 years it's been in development, and they're really starting to hit that same period as Star Citizen now. So you see the same kind of comments. I don't know how long they had server meshing planned in their sort of design of the game, but it's interesting to see the parallels in a lot of different games that are starting to get to that point. I know that also Rockstar filed a patent, I think 4 years ago or so, that talks about the idea of seamless server transitioning, probably for their next GTA Online. And I imagine, a company like Rockstar has the funds to do that. So it's cool to see that you kind of have to either dedicate your company to developing this kind of tech, or just be an absolute mammoth in the industry and have the resources to do it. I mean, I'm sure Epic might be the kind of company that also would come up with a solution for that, but it's really now a question of what situation do you need server meshing for? Because like I said before, Star Citizen is different from Ashes of Creation, is probably different from GTA Online, is different from Dual Universe or any other games that are trying to do this kind of stuff. So when people start seeing these tests, 800 players, the last time I think they were pretty smooth at 400, they tried 800, but it didn't work very well. Or even just 200, right? Anything above what we're seeing right now. What do you think that the company is really looking for when they're testing this stuff out, rather than just going to Evocati? Like, why are they running these preview channel tests?
So, and they've said on, I think, a couple ISCs now, at least the one very big ISC, this last one about server meshing, is the tech has gone shockingly well in development. Or surprisingly well, I think is their words. They were expecting a lot more headaches when they finally got to server meshing. I imagine that kind of worry came from not only developing games in the past and just like the first version of any game in like early development. Whenever you develop a tech, never ever goes to play, never smooth. It is the jankiest cobbled together mess of things, and it never goes smoothly. And we know this with PES and the rollout in 3.18 of the whole system.
That was fun.
It was, wasn't it? And people downplay the importance of 3.18 a lot. And I feel like everyone who downplays 3.18.
I mean, a lot of people didn't even change. Like, they didn't notice a change in the game other than things staying around a little bit longer. But the back end completely changed, right?
And the amount of things that you can go get your body now. That's something that is only because 3.18, because of PES. That was not a thing before PES.
Was it
if you died out in the wilderness, your stuff despawns instantaneously because no one's around to keep that item loaded.
Huh.
That is how big of a change 3.18 was. Not just like there was stuff to move around and like people are leaving their drinks all over the stations. That's the monumental change that persistent entity streaming came in.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, I know for sure that 3.18 was a big change, and really the unfortunate part of it is that they introduced a ton of different things on the back end. I think they said 12 new services at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't really, it's kind of like, what is there was an analogy. I used to DJ, so forgive me of this analogy, but people used to say, if you don't notice the DJ at an event, then they're doing a really good job. And that's kind of like what PES is, yeah? If PES is working and doing its job, you don't actually know that it's doing anything there. The game is just running as it's meant to. The problem is you start to notice it when things lag or back up or despawn and stuff like that. And you're like, PES isn't working. So I think we still have problems with the database. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's really what's holding back server meshing. But a big part of these tests they're doing also is related to the replication layer, right? They've been talking about RMQ, the messaging system that keeps things replicated between layers. Do you have a good understanding of that?
So RMQ, to my understanding, I don't have a good one, but I have an understanding.
Okay,
it does actually relate to the entity replication layer and the entity PES, which is it's the back end chat log of like all the services trying to communicate. When you hit a button for an elevator, it has to be like put through the servers. It has to run through all the logic that has to go, and the queue in RQM is a queue, as in a line, lining up stuff, lining up all these tasks that we're telling the backend to do or the game logic to do, so that it can work through them in a way that won't let it lock up. So when 50, 800 players are calling a ship, calling the elevators, and leaving bottles everywhere, it can still have a way to work through those tasks instead of saying, well, I gotta do this over here and this over here and this over here, so I'm going to call this guy's ship, pick up this bottle, and call this elevator, but the other 49 some odd 100 players still waiting to call their ship.
Yeah.
And that kind of lockup will make a lot of weird bugs happen.
So pick up your trash, people.
Yeah, it's so important. This is why we need a raptor. If CG doesn't give me the raptor, I will riot.
Mass trash pickup missions. Some people would love that, I want pizza deliveries. Some people just want to scrape up bottles off of the space station's floor. I'm not judging.
Like, do you remember the raptor teaser?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I mean, I'm sure, at the very least, it needs to be something that you could just find out in the verse and like hijack and drive. Like,
I mean, it was definitely a full production model.
Yeah, like it's in the game for sure.
Yeah.
You remember, and I guess this is kind of I would say this is a good segue back to 3.0, but I'm not ready to jump into that. We are going to talk a lot about 3.0 today, but you remember back when R-Corp was just its own module in the menu and people would be able to get the PTV and just drive it around the cityscape?
Yep.
Good times, folks. To do that with the Raptor. So the RMQ is... Huh?
It's hilarious how unchanged the Area 18 is.
Oh, yeah. So RMQ is important because that's literally what is telling the game what to do and in what order. Like when that doesn't mess up, whatever the previous version of this messaging system messes up, that's when your hangar takes forever to open, or when you reload your gun and it doesn't reload and your player just keeps doing the same animation over and over. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like basically any interaction that has to be talked with the server, which is most interactions because the game is client authoritative, and most of that is one. That's how you make a game without leaving yourself blatantly open to hacks. Because if it was
server authoritative,
server authoritative, I mean, if you have a client authoritative server structure, basically means I can tell my game on my computer that I'm running 1,000,000 miles an hour, and the server's like, you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour. That seems fair. With it being server authoritative, I can even like change my client saying I'm running 1,000 miles an hour, and the server's like, no, you're running 5. And my computer or my client just has to take it because it has no authority over what the server says. So basically, I'll be rubber banding, and everyone else will be fine.
So that's an important part of this, and that is something that actually we've just found out. They've started to tell us over the last week, and again, this is probably something that's talked about in Star Citizen Live, which is taking place in just a couple of hours from this recording. That is something that has been in testing in 3.24. They didn't really say that it was running, but it has been running and queuing up the game that we've been playing, which is, I think, it's a good sign that they feel confident enough to just put it in without starting a preview channel or Evocati or anything like that. Is that a positive to you? Do you feel like that means they're further ahead with that than we thought because they were just going to be doing preview channel, or how do you take that news?
If it's already in the game, one of two things has happened. Either, like you said, they're just confident enough it just worked, and that's seeing what we got when they did just the RQM test. I think it was RQM. Alone by whatever testing group they did, and they said, yeah, this works fine. And so now it's in 3.24. I imagine it just went well. The other possibility is they didn't get enough data from that test. They just need a real world data set. I haven't seen a lot of bugs that they've addressed to RQM or that kind of like even genre of problems. It's more networking and like lockups with like the game logic being broken with like hangers and stuff, like the cargo stuff not showing up. That doesn't seem like an RQM. At least they haven't attributed it. That's the word I was looking for. Attributed it to RQM or anything. So it may be the problem. It may not be. They haven't really said what exactly the problem is. But I would venture on the side of it was just good enough to put in live, so it's in live.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's talk about this testing. Server meshing, I put out a video like a week ago maybe saying that the most important thing now that 3.24 was live is to see what they do about testing in the lead up to 4.0. And it took them a week to get around to starting testing. And it's not Evocati, which I think we all would have hoped for, but it's still a week after. Like they're on the forefront of getting testing going. But it's also the preview channel wasn't used for most of the year. Do you feel like it's a little bit late that they got started with this? Does that worry you at all?
So worried, I mean slightly, I guess slightly, that we haven't been doing it all, that we haven't been doing the preview channel all summer. I had also assumed that we were kind of done testing channel. I thought that we were going to go straight from 3.24 live to 4.0 Evocati. And then when they said we're going to get several more 3.24 patches plus testing channel, I realized that 4.0 and server meshing are not the same thing, even though they are very, very, very closely tied together. And Evocati, what?
Said blasphemy.
Yes. And I've said they're the same thing basically several times. For most conversations, they're the same thing. For testing, they're very much different. Evocati cannot test server meshing properly because there are I don't know how many Evocati there are, but there's probably not 1,600 Evocati. And this test is 1,600 people, which is two shards of 1,800 people each. Is what they're trying to put out.
Wait. They're doing 2 shards of 800 people? I thought it was 1 shard of 800 in just Stanton.
I was reading something that was 2 shards. I may have my numbers incorrect. I know it's at least 1 shard of 800 people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Evo could pull those numbers at this moment. And could Evo, with their testing focus that they have, because they are Evocati, because they're good at testing the game, would they do things that normal players would do? When 4.0 goes to Evo, it may not necessarily be test server meshing, because they have so many systems, including an entire system, to test. So they have all of these like new relation, like faction relation. They have new missions. They have a whole ton of locations they need to check out. They're probably going to have more ships to test, and that is a lot of just kind of grunt work to test in Evocati.
Yeah.
It may make sense to leave the server meshing, since it's not a. They can apply server meshing to Stanton, as they're going to do in this test. So why not get the good numbers by doing a basically public server mesh test, and then leave Evocati to test those finite things that they're good at testing, that they have experience testing, which are the gameplay features, the art locations, and the ships.
That's a good point. Do you think that like we could see a non-server meshed Evocati test in just Pyro? So they're just testing like all that stuff, but not server meshing? Or do you think since all that stuff is kind of developed in line with server meshing, they'll have to have a server meshed environment anyways?
I think they could make a unserver meshed Pyro. I think it would cost more development time to do so, and I don't think that it would give them the most valuable data feedback back, I guess, or feedback. There we go. Because they need all these features to run, and they need all these features to run specifically in server meshing. So while we test server meshing out of Evocati and in this like pocket universe of the testing channel, Evocati will test all the new features like they have, but just like we tested 3.18 and Evocati went through 3.18, it was a paradigm shift then for 3.18. They still had to test all the normal things, much like in 4.0, they'll have to test all the normal things, just this time the paradigm shift is server meshing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they do it all. Because if server meshing is proving to be difficult in the preview channel, and they don't want to move to Evocati, but they do need to test all these things in Evocati, like engineering and the new outposts and the factions and all that stuff, what would they do? You know, what would they wait? Would they run preview channels in line with Evocati and have Evocati be a normal environment while preview channels do server meshing? It's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I can imagine there are two scenarios that server meshing, or specifically 4.0 as a patch, goes badly. So if it goes badly, there's one of two things that will happen. One, we get the next 3.18 patch where it's like delayed basically a year, and they just continue working on it, and we're getting these PTUs, just they're very much long-winded, and we'll be on 3.24 for the next couple quarters. Number two, which I think is more likely for the current state of CIG, is that they get it to a mostly playable state where like most of the game ending bugs are gone, but where like, well, not even gone, but like 90, maybe 70% of the community doesn't experience game ending bugs, and then just kick out the door. Because like it needs to be, they need to have data and they need to know where the bugs are, and that is very hard with what happened with 4.0. Evocati apparently got really burnt out really fast on it, because there was
with 4.0
3.24.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was just a whole bunch of really hard bugs.
That was rough. You could see that like they had to start opening up the waves and be like, please help us test this.
Mm-hmm. And after they got it into PTU, like the first couple patches, really rough in 3.24. But after that, it got better and better and better. And it got to the point where we were seeing higher frame rates in PTU than we were on the live build. And as far as like features, like there were so many things snuck in, because apparently they did a pretty wide vehicle maneuvering pass as well. Because I was racing in the Arrow in 3.24, and it felt completely different than live. Apparently, also the Mustang changed.
Huh. Yeah, I heard about that. Some of that and some of the combat updates too.
So there's a lot of stuff to test, and assuming, like I imagine Evocati is still tied to hype. Like they need to have that energy, that hype to test the thing because it's brutal. Testing anything at that state is brutal. So hopefully there'll be enough hype because it is 4.0, it is new system, is Pyro, that they'll be able to last a bit longer. Also, I imagine there should be more invites going out sometime before Evocati 4.0 because they need more help. There's a lot of stuff to test in there.
Yeah.
Like just look at the roadmap and like there's like engineering. Like I keep forgetting like different features that are in there. Like there's so many things to test.
There's undoubtedly some stuff they're not talking about too.
Oh yeah. Like it's weird currently because there's two like groups of things they're not talking about. Stuff that's in 4.0 that they want to surprise us with, and stuff that's in CitizenCon that they want to surprise us with.
I'm very hopeful that we see the quantum travel rework in 4.0. Like that is my number one thing that I'm holding out hope for, because that would really, I think that would make it, and as we're about to get into discussion about 3.0, that would really make it a parallel to 3.0 in terms of just changing over all the features. Now, when I talk about 4.0 in relation to 3.0, I'm including the 3.23 changes because it feels like they kind of split the overall game update into those two patches, and I guess 3.24 now too. But the quantum travel rework would be really key for especially moving around Pyro, and with some of these other changes we've seen, like now cargo routes are more like they should be watched more. They might be pirated or interdicted more. Quantum boost would really help with doglegging the routes and making sure you're not in those snares. Overall, I think there's still some pretty decent sized stuff that they're looking to add to 4.0.
Yeah.
Speaking of Evocati, how long do you think it'll take to get there for 4.0?
To get to an Evocati build?
Yeah.
As I like any day. I think
it's
they can
around the corner, like right around the corner.
I was expecting it the day that 3.24 went live. Like
how long? Go ahead.
It's like I said, there's so much to test, and they need to get started on it. They already pushed 4.0 into the next quarter, or now deadlining at the last day of the year, because they need to make sure they have enough time. Like the plan was previously, most of the year, to release it end of September, right?
The summer of 2024. I was thinking August is like the latest you could push a summer release.
So Q3 would have ended at the last day of September. So most of the year they've been planning
really
to
last day
it.
of September.
Yes,
sheesh,
is the end of the third quarter.
Right, I guess that makes sense. So okay, so then we can smudge when summer ends. I don't know. I'll just give a little question. When does summer officially end?
So September 22nd.
Okay. See. All right. Cool. So yeah, they could have done a late September, like literally the last day of summer, and they would have been like, yeah, see, we did it. So slipping away from that September 22nd deadline into the next 2 weeks gives it a Q4 launch. But I don't think anybody's expecting it to come first week of October, right?
I honestly imagine they're going to not imagine. I hope that they're going to do an always PTU at CitizenCon, and they're going to say
like open,
we've been testing
open
it.
all.
Yeah, just like it's not ready for the live build yet, but there's Pyro. Go have fun. Let's talk about.
I think that's at this point that's best case scenario, and also probably the best thing they could do in terms of their own messaging. Of course, that doesn't mean the features are released to live, and they still have another month and a half to do, like 2 months. Yeah, 2 months to really push it to live. But that would be pretty key. Now, that would give them a month and a half from Evocati. If they started Evocati this week, that'd give them a month and a half of Evocati to open PTU, which is shorter than 3.24 took.
Yeah. I also, based on the last roadmap roundup 2 days ago, they are still planning 4.0 for IE.
3.24.
Because no, 4.0 for IE.
Why do you say that?
Polaris is coming out at IE, and they didn't move the Polaris back to 324. They
I mean,
moved both the Zeuses back to 324, though.
the Polaris isn't even on the release view.
Release view, no, but it is on the progress driver. And they have, I forget where they stated it. But they did say that is and as we know from CitizenCon and the past year or so, past 3 years, I think it was in a roundtable before last year's CitizenCon, that the vehicle team was able to predict a ship coming out, I think, within a week. And that's how good their scheduling is on the vehicle team. And if they're scheduling it for IE, they know that it's going to hit IE. The only question is, how solid is 4.0 going to be? That is the biggest opening question of currently most of Cloud Imperium games. The next one is Where's Squadron?
Yeah, I don't know. I might have to diverge on you from that one. Or diverge from you on that one. Because the way I see, I mean, why wouldn't they have at least one of the Zeus stay in 4.0 then? You think they're going to release both of those at CitizenCon?
They did say last year that they wanted them out by CitizenCon. It was supposed to take the same amount of time that the Spirit did, and we had 2 Spirits by because the E1's not coming out till things haven't. So to get the Zeuses out again by CitizenCon, they need to be in the 324 branch because 4.0 is not coming out before CitizenCon now.
Yeah, that's definite. So we can definitely see from the way that they've timed the Zeuses, moving them to 324 branch. That means that the release of these Zeuses will be in a time when 4.0 is not available, which I think we all can understand would be CitizenCon at least. But you think that because they haven't said anything about the Polaris, 4.0 is expected for IAE. But how, like, that seems risky, right? To release a patch like that during IAE. Because
yeah, I mean,
you want a .x patch for IAE.
Cloud Imperium Games is nothing but impeccable for timing big releases around major events, because that's never happened before. Isn't it every Invictus we get like the most broken patch?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, they do a good job of releasing a secondary patch for Invictus, you know, releasing something in April.
An Invictus patch?
I think they got 3.18.1 out for Invictus. I think 3.18 released in, let me see, I've got the list up right here. Yeah, March 10th was 3.18. So they definitely had some time. They got 3.19 out for Invictus. So they do try and do a stabilizing patch for the events. And IAE is usually like a .x patch on top of whatever releases in October. Man, that would be the biggest press push they would have ever gotten for this game, period, in the last, how long has it been? 25 years? I don't know. However long it's been since they started development. It will be the biggest press if they do IAE after that CitizenCon and drop 4.0. I probably would cancel my Thanksgiving plans, to be honest. That would be crazy.
Oh man, like
sorry, Grandma.
It's a harebrained idea. Like, I'll admit, like it makes no sense given the track record of CIG. It makes zero sense. Because they have traditionally always erred on the side of delay it and release it later.
I think we'll just see the Polaris added to the release view in 324. I think they're just kind of waiting on that. Because why isn't it on the release view at all?
Can't release it.
Why not?
Because it requires engineering.
Does it though?
Yes.
Does it truly require it, or can they just
required to make the ship function? No. Do they have a build of it where they don't have engineering? Probably not as well. Is the whole reason they're tackling the Polaris finally now because of engineering? Also, yes.
I mean, yeah, I'm fully on board with that. I made a whole video about that was like the crux of my argument, was like, this is why they're doing capital ships, engineering's coming, all that. But then I think it might have been Hybrid on the podcast last week mentioned that the C2 already has all of its engineering components there ready to go, the fuses, the screen, all that. It's just shut down. So,
Well, they
maybe
had a pre-engineering version. I guarantee they do not have a pre-engineering setup for the Polaris. So they would have to go back and make a copy of it that they're going to use for a single patch to make sure it can work without all the data backing from engineering.
you know what the boys down at rehab call this, Nazeris?
What?
They call this hopium.
And
it takes weeks to get off of it.
It's just development. Like there isn't a version of the ship currently that runs without knowing the power plant levels, and the entire damage system has changed in, I think it's 4.0, that soft death won't happen until a critical component is hit.
Right.
So,
That was in the monthly report this week, huh?
Yes, that's what it was.
I haven't gotten to that.
And so the Polaris runs on that data system. So there's just too much in 4.0 that is probably already built into the Polaris, because that's where they've been planning to put it, that it would take more work to undo all of this changes for 4.0 in ships that other ships are going to need added on to them to remove it just for a single patch earlier Polaris.
Perhaps. And so you're also, I mean, I know there are a few reasons for why the Polaris would come at IAE. Obviously, they said so. And generally, they're right about ships. But the big one is IAE is a sale. And they don't miss sales.
They miss sales.
No,
Even
they have
if the game
auto aim
doesn't
for
work,
sales.
It doesn't matter. The sale page works. And they just revamped. I think the store revamp is supposedly coming soon.
I actually saw that the website, the header, is updated. I just noticed, I think yesterday. I don't know when that happened.
Good.
It's much better than before. I freaking actually find my way around the website now. Good God.
So it's the new flat design, which I love the flat design.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like new internet, I guess. I don't know if it's like millennial led or whatever, but like flat, simple designs. I just love them so much. Especially
I feel like
the coloring.
It originally came from WebOS, like made it really popular back in like 2009. Sorry, everybody, 2007 or something like that. And then Google was like material design, and Android, is very big, so that kind of drove a lot of design forward. And
that's one of the things that made me buy the Pixel.
Yeah, I like it. I like it, and it's good to see the website getting an update, because the website is. We won't get into that. So
It's,
okay, so
older than the game.
Yeah. And it's just so fragmented.
They had the pledge store before they had before they were done with the Kickstarter. Because you had the not the Faithful 7, like the Mighty 7 or something, the 7 people that found the website before they were actually done with it, while they opened it up for to test that it was actually displaying correctly. And they had 7 people find it and sign up for accounts.
Yeah, that was so dark times. So Evocati, you expect to happen pretty soon. I'm on board with you on that. I do think that whether it's a month and a half of testing, or I guess at this point it would be two months of testing if they were releasing 4.0 in November, or it's 3 months of testing, which would be in December. That's a lot of time to test. This is a lot of time for them to run iterations of preview channels in Evocati. And I know a lot of people are joking, oh, we're not getting 4.0 until July 2025. But like, you guys really need to understand where we are in the grand scheme of things. Every year we've been on the road to Pyro, or the road to 4.0, since like 2019, 2020. Like, it's bad. Okay, don't get me wrong. It's bad. But not a single time in any of those years did we even see closed testing of server meshing. Did we even see server meshing actually happen on the stage at CitizenCon? So we've now seen it progress from a very small application on stage at CitizenCon to closed preview channel testing, to open preview channel testing, to now some larger scale tests. And there's not really much else they can do now. I mean, everybody can joke about a 325 coming out in December, but like you said, things are starting to be designed for server meshing. There's less and less stuff they can release that isn't designed to work in a server mesh environment.
Yeah. I can't imagine a 325 just because they don't have enough features. Because everything's being developed for Squadron, CitizenCon, and 4.0 right now. Like that's the entire company right now. So what like honest features are they actually working on that don't require some of the baseline of 4.0? Maybe like some like character customizer stuff should be just built on the backbone that we already have, so that could be ported over. But like maybe some ships,
like charge and drain, like the little things like that, engineering, yeah. But when it comes to missions and stuff,
but can charge and drain and engineering be decoupled from anything else inside that's built into in 4.0? That's more of a like insider kind of question, but
yeah,
there's definitely a limited amount of things they could hog tie together to make a 325.
they could do a 325. Fact of the matter is, no matter what they do, I think it's reasonable to expect 4.0 will be in testing this quarter. So even if they do a 325 or something, we are still going to be able to start getting our hands on this update, whether it's Evocati, whether it's preview channel, whether it's PTU. And again, going back to the fact that the preview channel should have been used the whole year, as they were kind of telling us, it's still, I think it's significant that we're starting to see tests so quickly. Like they're locked in. They have their aim now on 4.0, and it's not like previous years where it was kind of just like a possible thing in the distance.
Yeah, I also think that people kind of forget what the preview channel is built for, which it's not for testing 4.0. It's not for testing features. It's for data that the developers need. And when they concluded the last couple tests of server meshing, they specifically said we have so much actionable data right now. Thank you all for participating. We're going to get back to work. They had plenty of data. That's probably why we haven't seen it. They knew what they needed to work on. Now that they're at the point where they've actioned on all the data, they've done the bug fixes that they need and that they've seen. Now we're back in testing because they need more data. It's not as much as it is a preview of tech for us. It's actually a data collection system that specifically the engineers working on server meshing are using to get actionable data.
It's gonna be a bummer if they get that data, and then after this podcast, they're like, "Hey, we got the data. It looks like this isn't gonna work for another year. Sorry." So we're 325, 326.
I can't imagine that
on the release view.
The amount of posturing they've done all year.
I mean,
I can't imagine that.
It is CIG.
That's where I bring in the hopium.
It is CIG.
It's also game development, I think, is the broader term.
Yeah, but like they can posture all they want. Reality sometimes smacks us all in the face, and things get delayed. But I'll say this: given that we've been stewing in this warm pot of hopium all this podcast up until now, I'll go this far because I know that I'm probably going to title this something like "Is 4.0 actually happening?" Right? I'll put that on the thumbnail or something. And what I've discovered is that most people only care about the thumbnail. So I imagine we'll get a lot of comments saying no, or just that. No other comments about the podcast. And I'd like to think we're about 43 minutes into this show. Wondering how many people have watched it this far who are willing to comment on this. How many comments do you see down below saying, no, it's not happening, rather than listening to this conversation and coming to some conclusion on this? Because I do think that at the very least, it'll be in testing.
Yeah, I'm trying not to say like things that I would need insider knowledge to actually know, but like, I cannot foresee any future that isn't always PTU by December 31st or whatever the last day of the year is. Yeah, December 31st. There's no scenario in my head where we're not in always PTU by then.
Yeah,
at the very least.
Like 3.18 didn't go into testing until I think December, and it still hit open PTU by the end of December. It stayed in open PTU for 3 months, but they still ran it.
And the fact that like once it hits that kind of like most people, I assume, not okay, Most people. Most people, when 4.0 is opened up to whatever wave that they get to go into, most people that I know of will stop playing live altogether. So when it's in all wave PTU, even the amount of numbers in live are just going to plummet.
The interesting thing, though, from that perspective, is that there are people who don't pay any attention to all this stuff, and obviously they're not watching this podcast. But there are plenty of people who play Star Citizen like it is a real game. They're just logging in every couple of days, or maybe every week, or every month. They play a little bit of live. They log out. They don't even know that we're moving towards 4.0, or that there's a big update coming, or that some big update just got delayed. They just kind of are playing it. We all have games like that. So that's interesting to me, because 4.0 could be in PTU for months and people would just not know.
Yep. There's also those weird ones that bought the game back in 2012 and haven't come back yet, just waiting for 1.0.
Yo, I get that. Honestly, I understand. And maybe
I
they're passing it down to their
people.
Kids. Yeah.
Just I wish I could come in now and just oh, look at all the pretty things, look at an almost done game. Seems like I'll join.
Better to come into this game now than way back then, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last question on this, and then we're going to talk about 3.0 and how it relates to 4.0 and the differences and how teeth gnashy I think things would be if this were the same as 3.0. What do you think the max players we will see is in a static server meshed environment, per shard? Let's say we have Pyro and Stanton, and they're both between one shard. I don't know how many servers we'll have. God knows. That's still definitely up in the air. But how many players do you think we could potentially see without dynamic server meshing taking over?
I don't even think the developers know that one. That one really depends on this current test, because they tried their last test. Their max was 800 per shard. I think there was also a single system.
Yeah, that was the Stanton test. What do you think? Rather, I'll rephrase. What do you think would be acceptable
for static server meshing?
Yeah,
honestly, anything, as long as it keeps the same, as long as it keeps the same density of players we have now. So we have 100 players now, 100, 150 when it's a good day, on a single server now. So that's in Stanton. So if we just go up to about 300 for 2 systems, that's acceptable. That sounds like a small number because it's supposed to be an MMO. But the reason I say such a low number is acceptable is because of how fast the engineers, specifically the developers developing server meshing, want to move to dynamic. And I'd much rather we get on that rule set than try and break all the servers than trying to push the static mesh to the breaking point every day logging in. Because once we get onto the dynamic rule set, once we can start breaking servers down, theoretically, and that's the only where server meshing exists right now, as far as even Astro Creation and other games that do it, theoretically you can have an infinite number of players by just making the servers denser. So we need to figure out where that actual boundary is, not the theoretical boundary. Yeah, but we need to be on the dynamic rule set.
I think, because you talk about the density, and it's well, what happens if we're still on static server meshing by the time Nyx comes in? Or Odin? I don't know what the 4th system would be, but maybe it's Odin. Maybe it's Castra. What if we're now split between 3 or 4 systems and we're still at only 500 players meshed? I think the number kind of has to exponentially grow, right?
Yeah, I think with I don't know how the system deals with more players over the entire mesh, but I would imagine that, like I said earlier, I think it was actually before the podcast. This 4.0, specifically just 4.0, not even 4.1, but 4.0 is the last foundational tech. It's the last time that they could say, well, that not the last time they can say, but the last time that a lot of the time they would say it's being held up by this tech, or
Yeah.
we're still
Yeah.
working on this together. Even dynamic server meshing doesn't stop Nix from coming in, because they can just expand the mesh to Nix. They can just expand it to Castra or to Odin or to Terra. Like, they can do it. Dynamic server meshing is just kind of like server meshing V2. It's kind of like mining V2. It's not foundationally moving. It's foundationally constructive, additive. There we go. I don't think they need it to add stuff in. I think they can still push the numbers of players when they just add more servers. That's why dynamic can work so much better than static, is because more servers, more players.
Everybody who was around back in 2018 remembers their slide, their road to release timeline. And even though organization systems was on there and still is not in the game, that last point was server meshing. And in my mind, that has never changed. So once we get to that point where server meshing is in the game, that's when you kind of start turning on the heat. You're like, okay, hey, you guys have no more real excuses for this to slow down. And then on top of that, doubly, Squadron 42 releases, it's like, okay, this game needs to hit overdrive in terms of development. Excuse me. Things need to start happening. So I'm in full agreement with you there. Like, once server meshing hits, static server meshing hits, it's different expectations for the way that this game goes. And I think they probably know that. But from the gamer's perspective, we should be getting to see things move more in the direction that we want in terms of the new game loops, exploration, new systems, AI. Oh my gosh, AI. We're talking about 300 player server mesh environment. That should also come with the fact that there are 3,000 AI flying around in their own ships, walking around in cities, able to be found at outposts.
The world's going to start feeling very dead with as much players as going to be running around. So they're going to need to, so they've been working on the new wildline system. I forget what it's called now, where NPCs will start talking and like mentioning things in the world. Star Sim still needs to come in to actually make like traffic in the world.
Yeah.
And the world's going to start feeling really dead without those kind of like foundational stuff. Not foundational, background looking stuff that kind of like textures the world. And it's no secret, no wonder why they're now talking about 1.0. It's because, like I said, like this is kind of the last big deal that this was the plan. So now that we're here, and now Star Citizen needs to become it's what's supposed to be. They need to get the 1.0. They need to finish the tech demo, as people love to claim that it is. And
it's kind of still a tech demo.
Oh, it definitely is still a tech demo.
Yeah.
It's screenshot simulator, tech demo simulator, whatever you want to call it. We're still testing it. As live as the live build is, it's still in testing. It's still an alpha plus beta, kind of weird in between. But 1.0 stops that entire line of thinking. 1.0 is done. Not that every feature and every planet and every vehicle will be in the game. It's not what 1.0 means. 1.0 means that they are going to treat the game as a live game. No longer is it live, but it is live. Go to PTU to get all your testing done.
And catch up with the rest of the player base, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
They finally get catch up with the legal team.
We'll see. Yeah, that's the new carrot, and we'll see how it goes. I do expect 1.0 to feel kind of like a beta release, but we'll see what they do. All right. So the actual topic of this podcast, I think we've kind of changed that topic a little bit, but the reason I did want to have this talk was because 3.0 had its own bag of tricks. That was a while ago. There are more people who have joined this game since, what update was it? Since 3.8 than before. And 3.8 was at the end of 2019. So that's like 6 years of development time, right? Versus the 4 years we've experienced since then. And more people have joined in that time since before. So a lot of people weren't here for 3.0. That's like ancient now in terms of Star Citizen development. But it was also a very difficult time. What do you remember from the 3.0 launch?
So 3.0 was that, like, it felt a lot like Arena Commander Plus, because everything was transient. Every time you logged in, it was the exact same rule set. Doesn't matter where you logged out, doesn't matter where you went, doesn't matter what you did. Every time you log on, it's the exact same start. So it's kind of like running a hardcore mode. You had until the server crashed or you crashed, was some bug happened. And there you could get everything done possible in the game at that point done within a day. There was no landing anywhere except for a couple of stations. I think we had
the moons. We had a
couple of fueling stations. Did we have moons in 3.0?
Crusaders moons in 3.0, yeah.
Okay, so we did have landing on planets.
But there were no cities.
I don't remember landing on planets yet. A lot of the missions were very much space dominant, for sure.
Combat.
Yeah, a lot of it was just space combat.
All combat and box deliveries.
Yeah, basically that was. Yeah.
It was a combat game, and
yeah. So we had just come out of only having Arena Commander, which is only combat. Well, I guess it was racing, but racing was nowhere in the game yet. And so they basically said, okay, we have combat. Now we need to make a world. Well, what's the only gameplay system they have to rely to make a game? Combat. So the fact that we got deliveries at all was kind of amazing. Because it was an entirely new system, and which since has been reworked like 50 times to get to where we are now.
Yeah.
Even with boxes still falling to the floor. The biggest thing I remember about 3.0 or kind of the 3.0 kind of branch is I wanted to do cargo hauling so bad, and apparently I wasn't the only one. Somebody made a app that you can run sort of adjacent to Star Citizen, and all it would do is like fake cargo hauling. And so in this app, you would say, I'm starting here with this ship, and then you could like buy commodities within that app and say you hauling it there. So you then fly in Star Citizen and say, okay, I'm here in the app. So basically it was just like role playing that you're cargo hauling.
Desperate.
And absolutely very, very desperate. And we're finally in 3.24. We are finally at the point where we can actually do that for real in the game.
To the chagrin of a lot of people. I am so amazed at how many people absolutely hate the fact that they've added physical cargo hauling into this game. It's surprising. But again, a lot of people have joined since 2020, and
a lot of people don't know what game they've gotten into.
Yeah, it's hard to go back and look at the different videos and find the different design blogs and all that stuff where they've talked about this stuff. And I think that same thing.
What counts and what doesn't? What are they still holding on to? What are they not holding on to?
Yeah.
Like that was a big thing with like medical stuff. Like anytime you bring up medical now, it's the camp of current players and people who know the death of the spaceman. Every time medical comes up. Are they still working on Death of the Spaceman? I believe they confirmed that last year. They are still working on Death of the Spaceman, which means the medical Ursa will be not spawnable at.
Well, I see they're changing things. Like they're working on Death of a Spaceman, but I think they are still building their ideas to conform to, the way gaming culture has changed since they came up with those ideas. So
yeah, one of them is walking off.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like you guys have to worry about them doing exactly everything that they've said in the past, but there are large brushstrokes in the design that they're not really going to move away from. Death of a Spaceman might not say that you are like perma losing your character or you're not limited to 6 deaths, but instead it's like 30. But it still is going to try and focus on the reality of death and how that should be something that you're quite worried about. And the same can be said for cargo hauling. Like, I think a lot of people were expecting there to be very hardcore elements to cargo hauling that maybe we're not seeing right now. But the idea that like you load your ship, I don't know what, like, who wants to be a cargo hauler and not be able to move the boxes around?
I think it's not the cargo hauler. Every cargo hauler I know loves the new update. I think it's the people who want to make the money and the people who don't play cargo that have a problem with the update. The people who are like just trying to go do bunkers, or that now have so much more friction to just prepare their gear onto their ship. I think those are more the people, because I like I said, no cargo hauler I know doesn't like the new update. And like even cargo haulers, like specifically cargo haulers, have the auto load feature. You don't have auto load for your equipment and stuff to do other missions.
That's true.
Like, you
And
can't auto load, like go to the cargo terminal, put stuff in boxes. You can't say, okay, auto load that crate into my ship. You have to move that one.
I think a lot of people don't realize you can store that stuff on your ship. That might also be, not only can you store that stuff on your ship right now, but you'll be able to just log off and on from your ship as we move forward. There's a lot of things that the game doesn't say that I think makes people angry. But yeah, let's back to 3.0, because we didn't have the cargo hauling back in 3.0. We didn't have mining. We didn't have salvaging. You couldn't buy ships. You couldn't rent ships. You couldn't send money to other players. Quantum travel was completely different. The star map was different. The HUD was different. Everything but 3.0 was the time when they started updating that stuff, right? It's kind of like this year. All of those systems that came with 3.0 flipped over with this year.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So, and I think there was I think Yogi's actually commenting on stuff today about the flight model. And one of his posts today was very much about why they had the system before master modes that they did. It was because 3.0. Like, that was the reason we had what we had before master modes.
Right.
And that was because, good.
It used to be, the system that we had before 3.0 was a lot like what master modes is now, right? We had two different flight modes.
It was Arena Commander, and that was it. Like, now we have missile mode and a couple other flight adjustments, but they wanted to get back that, as they call it, flight geometry that they had back in Arena Commander, and keep basically traversal unfrictioned by combat. And they want to keep combat unbroken by going 1,000,000 miles an hour. Because that obviously doesn't lead to a good experience for most people. Specifically, and the only one that actually matters, the developers. The developers didn't like it. This is the developers' game, and if they want to make it look a certain way, it's absolutely their prerogative. Do they have any like care about what the community thinks? Absolutely, they do. Obviously, they need to make a game that people want to play, but they have seen that more people are engaging in combat, more people are using the system, and more people have a decent outlook on the system where it is in the state that's in, where she goes to elaborate. It's not done yet. There's a lot of like tweaking and balancing and things they want to still add to the entire flight model. One of the major ones being completely overhauling the atmospheric flight system.
Yeah, atmospheric flight's supposed to be a lot different.
Yeah,
still haven't gotten around to that.
So we're getting another, I hope it's in 4.0. We haven't heard exactly where the new flight model changes are. I hope it's in 4.0. We at least know it's in the 4.0 branch, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get to that sometime with post 4.0. But with 3.0, we got a whole new flight model, and we're getting a whole new flight model soon. TM. In 3.0, we got box message for the first time, and in 3.24, we just got cargo missions. We got space stations in 3.0. We're getting new space stations in Pyro.
Yeah.
In 3.0, we got Tessa Bannister and the ICC probe. In 4.0, we get
taken away for 3.0.
Taken away? No.
Yeah. Remember, Tessa was 2.6. And then they started to do the other mission givers with 3.0.
I think I'm thinking of two different updates in the same update. Because I think
that was one of the big losses of 3.0 that people still lament. Was Tessa Bannister was lost. No, in 3.0 we got Ruto, Miles Eckhart were the two mission givers.
What am I thinking of? What?
2.0?
Hangar module, Arena Commander. Where was Where could you first go to Crusader? When could you
Um,
first log into the Crusader system?
that was 2.0. Pretty sure 2.3 or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking of.
yeah, because they switched over the missions there. But they did, like you said, they did do the other things that you were mentioning there.
I've been thinking. Yeah, I've been thinking of the entire. So, reason so broken is we were in the three buttons. We always had three buttons. We had social module. Where's my there? There's social module, a Crusader, and Arena Commander.
Yeah.
Um,
The social module was just the center area that we have in Area 18 right now.
and there was an update somewhere like about like a year, 2 years before they actually killed the entire social module. That they added like a sort of second district, but it was kind of like just a alleyway you could go to.
Yeah.
The construction area.
Which is still there. That was the place where they had like it was across the bridge, right? They had like the Saber Raven as a model out there or something that you could look at.
There being lots of cranes and there being a lookout area.
Okay.
That was
yeah.
like it was over a new like because they were showing off something about the procedural tech that they could like generate new areas pretty quickly, and it was a completely different, not a whole bunch of high rises. It was a bunch of like low rises. You could basically see for a really long distance over the landscape.
Yeah.
Cityscape.
But for 3.0, a lot of that really specific stuff changed. Like you said, they changed the flight model. They introduced atmospheric flight. They did the HUD, which we saw updated in 3.23. They did the star map, which again 3.23. The Moby-Glass apps, the cargo system, the new mission system, like a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now.
Stamina.
Even the Bearing P8 SMG.
Which also got reworked this year.
Yeah. The P4AR, like many of the initial really substantial stuff that made the game, gave its identity, was introduced in that 3.0 pass, which gives the feeling that the whole 3.0 range of updates was this kind of placeholder almost. Like it was all the stuff that they just wanted to have in place to allow players to play a live build of the game, allow people to stay busy, allow them to get some idea of what's going on until they could get the actual systems they needed to build the real game, which now that we're seeing 4.0, as you were saying before the podcast, kind of feels like the beginning of them building the real game with the real systems that they realistically want to release with. And that's why everything is being so reworked right now.
Yeah. We're finally at the point where they have not only the technology, but they have the experience. They have all the things they need, all the prerequisites for going back and for continuing forward in this production ready state.
Yeah, I hope they can capitalize on it. Do you think that anything that we're seeing in 4.0 is as exciting as that first time where we got to land on planets in 3.0?
Yes. Traveling jump point. I think that's easily like a 1-to-1. I think it's a bit diminished by having to call ATC because it doesn't feel like this should, like, I understand like the gameplay reasons and I understand why it's there, but it feels a lot more rigid than I think a lot of us, at least specifically me, was thinking like jump points were kind of these like more ethereal kind of things, and it adds like this kind of like rigidness to it.
Like you feel you should just be able to fly straight through it?
So I thought there was going to be, you fly up to a range in front of it, and then your quantum dart does a handshake with the portal, and you go. I mean, that's kind of like what we've been shown for a couple of years now. I mentioned it as border control. It is definitely border control. Yeah.
So yeah, what if transient points are like that, where you just fly into them?
Yeah, that is now. the next kind of like the thing. It like they are like that. They've outlined how you interact with a transient jump point. And it is you find one and you give it the quantum drive handshake, and then you go through it, unknowing where it's going to lead you to. Yeah, but I think, just to your question, like I think traveling a jump point is landing on planets for 4.0.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I think that, I mean, landing on planets was pretty novel at that time. Going through a jump point does feel like something that you could experience in other games. It is.
Like,
It's pretty
look at all the
unique.
space games like that are coming out, even Star Wars Galaxies now. Like, landing on planets,
Outlaws.
sure, it happens, but I've seen the cutscenes that they play. One, they're cutscenes. Two, there's a massive, very unrealistic, very terribly hidden, like break between space and the ground.
Yeah, definitely.
And it loads in the ground level. I mean, it's functionally no different than Jedi Survivor, where you were in, not even in space, but like just load and load screen to the next.
I like it better because at least you get that feeling of going down to the planet as opposed to just swipe screen. Now I'm on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, that makes sense.
There's some improvement there, and I think for a company like Massive that isn't necessarily focused on the space all that much, they're focused on like the
Star
action
Wars
adventure.
focused on space.
Well, yeah, but it's not a space game. Like, let's be honest. It's a Star Wars game, but it's not a space game in the sense that we're looking for. And I think they don't have the money for that, you know?
That makes sense. But like, feasibly, think of all the things that happen in Star Wars in space. How many of them are not combat?
Very few.
I don't know.
I don't have a Star Wars encyclopedia in my brain, but all the scenes that inspired me from Star Wars were in space combat related. And I think that I like what they did.
That's just Battlefront. Like, that's fine. Like,
but that's
Star Wars
exactly
games don't really beget like a lot of space things, and because you're not in space a lot, you don't really need to have that clean transition. So like they don't need it. But
it's not as
either
important.
Way, landing on planets is kind of still very novel, especially transitioning seamlessly to the ground.
Yeah, and there are other games that allow you to land on planets, but I think Star Citizen really hits a nice feeling. Now, it's probably too long for a lot of people, and like a casual game that might end up on console. I think the transition from space to planet in Star Citizen would need something to help get people there faster. But for somebody looking for a very in-depth immersive space game, it is super novel. Even now, like it's still, and it's beautiful because all the different planets have different atmospheres, different cloud formations, different stuff that looks different. And it can make a big difference when you're playing the game. So when I look at that and I compare that to jumping through a jump point, I don't know if I see that much of a difference when it comes to Star Citizen's version of jump points compared to other games, you know?
Mm-hmm. Like it from this side, it does feel kind of like a playable cutscene. We haven't seen them, and we're only going to get one in 4.0. So it's much. We have a lot less of an idea of what jump points as a kind of entire archetype of gameplay is. So we don't know if there's more unstable ones. We don't know the different shapes that they're going to take between different planetary systems. We don't know the kind of like what goes into a jump point flavor to make it going to Magnus or going to Pyro or going to Terra different than each other. With planets, it was right there. Damar's like brown, and Selen is more grayish, and then Yella is a bit more bluish gray. Like they were there. They were hanging in front of us as being different already. And as they've iterated on them, though, they've taken their own kind of, like, they have different atmospheric pressures and different storms on them. And so all these planets we've had a lot of development on to make them so different, to make them so interesting to be around. The problem, like, where jump points have to kind of live up to, like, they have a so much smaller data set of things that are going to happen within a jump point. One, it is only transitional space. Like it's basically the atmosphere of a planet, not just the planet, not the planet itself. There's no destination in a jump point. And so they have a lot less to do. They also need to be easily traversable to a point. Obviously, if you're a terrible pilot, you're just gonna die. But there's also so many fewer of them around that they're never going to be as interesting as planets, just on the basis of their hallways between interesting things. And so the other side is so interesting. Like Pyro comparatively is so interesting to the front door. Like you don't go to the mall and go, wow, that's a fancy door they have there. Well, let's go back home. That was my day.
Some malls have great doors. I'll say that.
They have great doors, but that's not the destination. That's not why you're going to the mall.
So, I mean, like a new system is definitely as interesting as landing on a planet. And you're basically getting multiple planets to land on, go into a new system. So it still has that kind of sort of parallel excitement with 3.0.
Yeah. Like it has more, but I would definitely still say that the jump point, for me anyway, the jump point is the landing on planets at 4.0.
Do you think we'll ever see a 5.0?
No. That is the easiest one for me to answer. Just there is no tech we know of right now that can be put into a 4.0 release. 2.0 was, I think, let me make sure
that was the PU.
Correct. That was the baby PU. That was the first time we loaded into the Crusader map. First time we woke up in LSR. 3.0 was the first time landing on planets. 4.0 was the first time jumping between planets. What's next?
Yeah, I don't...
Like, we have the game. Like, we have the foundation. 5.0 is 1.0.
Yeah, that's basically why they're calling it 1.0. There's not really another paradigm shift that this game needs to get to where it is. Base building is a big deal, but I think base building is more a focus of the 4.x branch of patches, in the same way that, I don't know, like space stations was a focus of 3.x or something like that.
Yeah, I think we within the last couple of years, we've definitely have had this like monumental shift on a lot of the features we have, like distribution centers. That feels much more like a bigger shift in kind of like locations than you can say it was in the 3.0 branch. Kind of like dismissing it as older tech, or dismissing it as like 4.0 has a whole bunch of newer stuff in it. Like, I think distribution centers is kind of not grandfathered in. What's the word I'm thinking of? Like honorary 4.0 feature.
Yeah, they'll stick around.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of stuff.
Like, the entire underground to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the 3x branch of patches that will definitely stick around. And I'm still curious about the underground portion. That whole locations area of development has me curious. Building interiors, underground facilities, like what's going on with that stuff? I hope they talk about that sometime soon.
I desperately hope, because they said they parked building interiors to work on distribution centers, and they said last year that we're not getting, like, they did not talk about the underground area at all. Yep. We still don't have raids, and we have no idea where raids are, which is kind of was the lead in to getting the underground portions. But also, much like we have your salvage contracts, bounty hunting contracts, now hauling contracts, mining contracts were supposed to come partially due to the underground portions of the distribution centers. There'll also be hubs of manufacturing, which is also crafting and sort of stuff like that. So the distribution center definitely live at the center of a lot of the gameplay that they really want to add.
They've gotten very quiet about them.
They have, and it's very strange. Building interiors is probably my like most anticipated feature right now.
They're big staples of what I think 4.x would be, but the fact that they've gotten so quiet about them is a little bit worrying.
Yeah, I don't think we have quantum travel system. I don't think we have atmospheric flight in 4.0. I don't think we have underground facilities, underground portion of DCs. I don't think we have building interiors at all because, again, we don't have DCs. So I'm hoping for more of the stuff that like was at CitizenCon, the more faction-based stuff, the faction rewards, basically just everything they said other than those things at CitizenCon in 4.0. I know the 4.4 branch will be like very dense with features that we've talked about basically the entire podcast long.
Yeah.
But I think we're still ways off from like the cohesive thing that everyone saw at last year's CitizenCon. Which is
Hopefully,
why 1.0 is there.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's almost this CitizenCon, so we'll see what happens there. But like we've been saying throughout this, we're probably going to see 4.0 enter some form of testing here in the next month, maybe month and a half, and we'll start to get a much better idea of where things are going in the immediate future. Once 4.0 comes out, God knows what happens. I mean, that's what CitizenCon is for. It starts to talk about kind of what's coming after 4.0, but until CitizenCon, it's up in the air. And it's weird to say after 4.0 because that's been our goal for like 8 years, but hopefully we can start to.
I'm so done with Pyro.
Yeah, and I mean that's the bummer of Pyro being linked to 4.0. It's like it's always been there.
I don't know how many players are looking forward to Pyro as like the theme, because the theme is anti my personality entirely. I don't care for the theme. I don't care for the piracy angle. I don't care for the grunginess of it. I don't like it. And so having been everything locked behind Pyro and having to hear about Pyro for like the last 3-4 years as the only thing on the horizon, and then Nyx is after that, it's another not lawless but not nice system. It's still cobbled together. I've been to Levski. It's not a nice place. There are piles of trash just in the lobby. Like Castra and Cascom in it, and Terra Prime. Even heck, Odin and Shubin have nicer hallways, nicer places to be.
I think
I'm ready for the nice side of the pretty side of Star Citizen.
Ellis
Green with the Murray Cup, like.
There
are so many pretty places in this game, and we're locked behind trash dystopia Hurston, overpopulated ArcCorp, sitting in the clouds but is constantly bombarded by Ninetales ArcCorp. Microtech is pretty. It's a college town basically, and they do a lot of drugs there. So Beta Crusader and Microtech are really the only like pretty places there. And then we have 2 planets plus 2 more whole systems that are dedicated to not nice looking things.
I think CIG needs to start focusing more on letting people know that Pyro is not the only thing getting not the only thing getting updated for 4.0. Like there are a lot of features that will come in to make Stanton better in 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, because a lot of people are looking at 4.0 and saying, hey, I don't like Pyro. There's nothing in this update for me. When we both know there still is. There's plenty. Charge and drain, engineering, all that stuff. That's coming back to Stanton at some point. Maybe not immediately in 4.0, but likely in that first update or two. And I think that they are doing themselves a little bit of a disservice by not showing that there is gameplay coming in 4.0 and not just new locations. Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff they talked about in at least some of the ISCs that are Pyro X, whatever. Like you said, the charge drain, that is a feature that goes anywhere that your multi-tool now uses. That is a method of working on ships. So charge and drain applies to both. Maybe not the repair missions that are in Pyro. Maybe they'll get that before. Maybe we won't. I don't know. Engineering obviously goes wherever ships go. So like a lot of the core tech is being applied to both. Whether the like specific like themes and trappings of the outposts that they talked about when they were talking about the social outposts and like detailing which each outpost does, because we have scrapyards in Stanton, are they going to pull over the tech they're using for the new scrapyards in Pyro or Stanton for 4.0? So we have that kind of parity. We don't know. They haven't talked about it.
Yeah, still a lot of questions about it. But Nazeris, I think we got through everything today. A little bit of a look at 3.0 versus 4.0, but a lot of look at the realities of whether 4.0 is happening this year based on the testing they're doing, the movements they're making in terms of server meshing. I think this was a good summary, man. Thank you so much for joining me for this one.
Thanks for inviting me.
Can you let everybody know where they can find your other content?
So I post. I wish I posted more. No, I live stream mostly currently on the Nova Forge, both on YouTube and Twitch.
Cool, and
then
we will.
in many Discords, mostly Paul's and Trees, making way too many spreadsheets about way too many things. Specifically, an archiving project I'm currently on. So I have a spreadsheet currently that has archived all roadmap roundups and laid them out, so you can basically see an entire list of the feature that they mention and color coded to what happened to them, whether they were added to the progress tracker, added to the release view, completed, or gotten rid of or parked. And I'm working on the monthly reports now, doing the same thing. Not color coding anything because there's not a lot to color code. And I've also started up a similar kind of adjacent archiving project for every image of Star Citizen. So I'm using Pinterest to give all the images tags and links so people can easily search just images of Star Citizen. Because there's a lot of older ones that I've looked for, specifically like storefronts and shops. And there's a really nice, I think there's a luxury furniture store that I keep losing. So starting with monthly reports and the, what's it called, the archive of the subscriber archive that you can get to in those images, and putting them all in Pinterest.
Pinterest, nice. Well, thank you. Those links will be down in the show notes for you all. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this show. And to everybody who has watched or listened, hope you all enjoyed this. Hope you got something from it. Very sorry for my broken way of talking. I am, excuse me, quite sick. But we made it. We got through this one. So thanks again for joining me. Supporters who are here live, I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Your comments are always lovely to read. And I will see you all next week. Bye.